Welcome back to the show. Today we're joined with David Hatfield, who's talking to us about masculinity. So David, tell me more about men's work.
Well, one thing I want to add is something about what men's work is not.
Okay.
So men's work is not, I'm really saying this to the men out there who are watching your program, going to a men's event is not an admission that there's something wrong with you, or even worse than that, there's something wrong with you as a man.
Okay.
It's not an admission that you're broken in some way, that you need fixing. So it's not about having a deficit and coming to get worked on. And that's why I stress all men are welcome.
Okay.
So it's a shared exploration. It's different for each man, but there's a sense of shared journeying and a sense of shared community within that. And for almost all men in this part of the world, that is radically brand new.
Okay.
And I always ask in every group, and I've worked with over 20,000 boys and men at this point, I always ask, how many of you have done anything like this before in your life? And it's like 1 or 2% on a good day.
Okay.
So for most men who might be watching, just know, I'm assuming that this would be new for them.
So it's not a support group?
It's not a support group.
Yeah.
No, it's not, and we're not single issue focused.
Okay.
I mean, if we are, the issue is masculinity itself, which is a very broad spectrum.
Okay.
Another thing I'd like to say that masculinity work is not, or men's work is not, it's not, when men have come together in groups throughout history, some horrible carnage has come out of that.
Okay.
And acknowledging that lineage, and not to say all men coming together in groups has done terrible things, but there's been a lot of male violence in our human family throughout time. And when men are doing this men's work here, this is not anti-female work. This is work that is not, by gaining something together as men, we do not take something away from women or any other group for that matter. And I think there's a bit of nervousness, a bit of suspicion or resistance, concern sometimes about men going off behind closed doors to do some mysterious men's work kind of things together.
Of course.
And a perception that maybe some badness could be coming out of that. So I just want to really underline that and say, actually, no. And for me, actually, men's work is not the end result that I'm going for.
Okay.
And I'll just throw this piece in. The full name of the Manology course is Manology, Exploring 21st Century Masculinity.
Okay.
So the end game for the Manology course is creating a stronger resilience in community, which helps us face 21st century challenges like climate change, food security issues, wobbly capitalism, whatever it is. Major change, like the nature of your show, is really focusing on that, is already here and more is coming our way. And this is one of the ways that I feel like I'm being called to help in that wider, bigger picture lens. Yeah.
Now, David, why is that different for men? Like, why the topics that you talk about, for example, whether it's climate change, globalization, whatever the topic is that you talk about, why is that any different than talking to a group of women than it is talking to a group of men?
Well, men and women are, we are the human family. And when we talk about men, we're talking about women. And when we talk about women, we're talking about men. It happens endemically. We're so linked. We have so much more in common than we are different in so many instances. And we are specific societal groups.
Of course.
And the big difference between us in terms of this conversation that I see is that there's been a women's movement.
Of course.
I'm 46 years old. I grew up in Canada. That's all I've ever known. My whole life has happened during that frame of the women's movement. And I'm grateful for that, for my mother, my 3 sisters, my 5 nieces, who are having staggering more possibilities in life choices than my grandmother and her mother. And men haven't come together in the same way. There hasn't been something that's galvanized us in the same way. That's a place where we're very different. And as such, there's been no, for example, academic men's studies. I mean, I've been scouring North America looking for a program I could take, and there isn't one. There literally is not a full-bore men's studies program out there. So by and large, men have not gathered. We have not had these conversations. And again, one of the end games in my work is to actually bring men and women together. So in the Manology course, one of our innovations is we actually have some female instructors.
Okay.
And we're planning a session for May this year to have female participants as well. So to make it a real co-gender dialogue session. So Yeah, there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of specificity
Of course.
about this kind of work. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you made reference to something called the script.
Yeah.
Let's chat more about that. What does
Okay.
that mean?
So, in my work, in each session, I'll ask a group to answer the following question. And let's pretend it's grade 9 boys.
Okay.
And we'll just say, the question is, what do you think the world expects from you as a man, or as a boy, or as a male, whatever we say it as? And then I'll stand back and I'll say, call out anything that comes to mind, and I'm going to write it all down.
Okay.
So they write things like, be tough, be strong, have a strong body, like don't back down from fights, don't dress like a girl,
Yeah.
you should know how to fix a car, you should know how to play sports, you should be good at sports,
Of
be good at
course.
video games, people think you have bad manners, you should be funny. We make this big list. And then I'll ask them the following question, and this is the exact wording that I'll use. And the very first times that I started doing this, it felt like a big risk, because you'll see why in a moment.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this for a while. We've sifted through some of these ideas. There's dozens of ideas up on a blackboard somewhere. And I'll say, now, okay, check this out, you guys. Raise your hand if you believe, just for yourself as an individual person, male person, that set of ideas has a forceful impact on your every waking day.
Okay.
And then there's a bit of silence. They're kind of looking around like, what's the other guy going to say?
Yeah.
And then some hands start going up. And slowly there's a forest of hands emerges. And it always happens in silence.
Amazing.
And for me, that's a men's studies moment.
Okay.
Because none of the information that went up on that board is new to anybody. Most of this work is not new. It's not rocket science.
Of course.
What's new about it is actually doing the work. And the work is treating this topic as a legitimate area of focus.
Absolutely.
So in that moment of silence with all those hands in the air, there's a solemnness to it. And that's one of the first times in a workshop, and there'll be lots of them when I'm teaching, where the boys' ideas of difference, how they're different from each other in terms of size, athletic ability, popularity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, height, whatever. That guy likes the Canucks and I don't like the Canucks, whatever it is. They realize they're connected to something way deeper that's never been talked about before. And that's magical. That's a really powerful place of interest where males of all ages get engaged in that. And it was exactly the same way for me when I first got involved. So a quick script story is that the power of this script, and I've gone to the trouble of hiring an artist to make that poster, to have it on the wall, to just remind ourselves, this is something we did not create, we were born into.
Okay.
It's a forceful part of our waking lives, and it would be smart for us to get really interested in having some mastery about understanding how this system works.
Okay.
One of the ways that I learned about it was just at the very beginning of my career with this work. And my father was in the acute stage of his leukemia, so he's in the last 3 months of his life. He's a physician, he knows exactly what's happening. He's told us the stages, but he's now been hospitalized. And my mother and I are sitting with him in his room one day, and he needs to go to the bathroom, so he's getting up out of the bed, and he makes his way, and he comes back. He's wearing those little flimsy gowns, and it's all very awkward. And as he's getting back into bed, and my mom's physically helping him, because he can't keep food or fluids down, he's lost weight, and he's lost muscle tone. And he says something I've never heard anything remotely like this come out of his mouth before. He says, just kind of to himself, almost under his breath, I'm such a wimp.
Yeah.
And even right now, that was 10 years ago that he died. Such a powerful reminder for me about the power of that script, you know? And for my father to see him and hear him in that state where he's obviously struggling already, and at a moment where he's most vulnerable, the person who has anything to say about it is him, and it's a negative. He's criticizing himself. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
You know, he's a man who carried himself with such confidence and humor. So around that time, I had just started doing my work.